Welcome, my beautiful brothers and sisters. Welcome to Astro Fenixx, flying into the moment yet again and radiating love as always. And I wanted to talk to you all about a couple of things. As you can see in the title, we're going to be talking about the ego, dimensions, and the age of Aquarius. Now, I want to preface this by saying, do your own in-search. And what I mean by that, I'm saying in-search purposefully instead of research, because I want you to do your own in-search. You can research as well. You can look at what other people are saying, whether it's through videos or books, but I want you to do your own in-search as well. Because when it comes to these sort of topics, and when it comes to expansion, when it comes to consciousness, when it comes to raising our vibration and our frequency, you are the best source to go to on how to do exactly that. For you are an extension of God, Goddess, Source creation, Source perspective. You are an extension of that energy. You are an extension of that, which is the creator. And honestly, it's interesting because I say these words and honestly, they don't do it justice. They really don't. That's why there are dimensions where language doesn't exist. At least not in the way that language exists here. You don't speak audibly. You speak telepathically. So these words really are going to ultimately fail you in giving you a deeper understanding on these particular topics. But it is my hope that providing my 2 cents on these topics can give you some insight, some clarity perhaps. But if this doesn't quite resonate with you, then that's cool. If it does resonate with you, cool. Take what works with you, take what works with you and leave what doesn't work with you. Or at the very least, hold space for what doesn't work for you. Now, there's a lot of talk in the spiritual community about these topics, about the ego, about dimensions, about the age of Aquarius. And I want to really address these things because what I'm seeing is a sort of repeating of the past. And this is based off of patterns that we have been performing for eons. So I'm not really surprised by this, but this video is going to have a little bit of this feeling of a warning, because I see people trying to skip steps. I see and feel people wanting to skip steps and to not take what I feel is the necessary and natural progression of this expansion of our awareness, of our consciousness, as we raise our vibrations and as we shift into new realities. So let's talk about the ego. Ego is sponsored by the vibration of Aries. Now, there's this push within the spiritual community to get rid of the ego, to abolish it, to destroy the ego, to get rid of the ego, to say fuck the ego because we do not need the ego. The ego has caused so much of the strife in our world. And I can see why people feel this way. And as I continue this talk, you'll understand why. And the reason why people are lashing out against the ego, mostly, some people understand that the ego, a healthy ego, is actually very essential to growth. But for the most part, this disdain of the ego is actually arisen out of fear. And it's this fear of falling again. It's this fear that we'll go back. So, based off of this fear, and based off of acting out of fear, we decide to box up the ego and put it into a sort of a prison and say, no ego, bad ego, go away ego, you are not wanted. And this is what actually, and here's the interesting thing about the ego, is that since it is ruled by and sponsored by the vibration of Aries energy, this is what makes Aries so rash, impulsive, and really have this sort of I don't give a fuck kind of attitude. Because the whole world can be against Aries and they're still going to move forward. They can fail at something many, many, many times over, but they can still going. They can still keep going. The beautiful thing about Aries is that while they may be rather impatient, a very much so committed Aries, a committed Aries is able to tap into these pockets of energy, these reserves of energy that is really unbridled. Not too many signs can do this, except for the other fire signs. Not too many signs can just tap into this energy. Leo can, Sagittarius can, but Aries has this ability to push forward even in the most dire of situations, even in the most dire of circumstances, even in the most futile of circumstances. And so long as Aries energy exists, you can't get rid of the ego. So I'm just going ahead and just nail that away right now. You cannot get rid of the ego, no matter how hard you try. This vibration that we call the ego exists, has always existed, and will always exist. So, if we cannot get rid of the ego, we have to learn how to integrate the ego. And we have to learn how to exalt the ego so it can work for us and not us for it. But, you know, we see a lot of people lashing out against the ego, blaming the ego for certain things, blaming the ego for why they do certain things, why other people do certain things. And yes, a underdeveloped ego can definitely have a big head. It's the reason why Aries rules the head. And if you have a big head, it's kind of hard to walk around. It's kind of hard to hold that up because it'll break your neck, first of all. Just be real. And like just imagine a regular looking human, but imagine their head being like 3 or 4 or 5 times the size. The neck would break. It's not sustainable. There's a reason why the head is the size that it is, because it is not sustainable to have a larger head physically. Physically, it's not sustainable. You know, unless you work your neck out, Taurus, a lot. But the ego is actually essential to growth, and it's essential to expansion. And believe it or not, it is actually essential to get outside of space and time. Now, this is going to feed into the topic of dimensions. Now, another misconception that I've been seeing in the community is this whole belief and idea that we're moving from the 3D to 5D. This is only partially correct. This is only partially correct. Now, there is certainly an aspect of us that is moving to fifth dimensional consciousness. But we cannot skip steps. This is really important. This is really huge. And if we try to skip steps, now here's the thing. You can skip steps as an individual, but the danger in skipping steps dimensionally is when you try to transport the entire collective to another dimension and try to skip a dimension. In this case, we're talking about the 4th dimension. There's this whole idea that we're moving from 3D to 5D. And while this is true, this is also not true, because in order to move from 3D to 5D, we have to understand and integrate four-dimensional awareness, which, guess what, is sponsored by Cancer. Now, I'm going to say this kind of bluntly, and I want you to kind of take this as more of a concept because it's more complex than this. But essentially, if you were to look at astrology and the 12 signs, each of them represent a different dimension. Aries, ruling the natural first house, rules the first dimension. Taurus, ruling the natural second house, rules the second dimension, and so forth. Which means that since we are in the 3D, the vibration of Gemini sponsors our experience. And what is Gemini? It is mutable air. It is perception. It also rules communication. It rules neighborhoods. It rules language in many ways. It rules the mind, the lower mind. And it actually, if you think about this, explains a lot of the strife that we have in our world, because there's a lot of people talking, there are a lot of conversations being had, but there's a lot of miscommunication. There are a lot of communication errors. There are so many different languages in the world, which shows that language itself and the way to understand these concepts, the way that we can look at a rock and say that is a rock, but then it has a different name in all these other different languages. And here's the thing. 10 people that speak 10 different languages can look at a rock or a tree, and they can be looking at the same thing, and they can call it by 10 different names. And believe it or not, those 10 different names actually have their own vibration, even though they're referring to the same thing. So, for example, tree, the English word, for tree, which sounds funny when I say it like that. But if I were to look at a tree and a Spanish person were to look at a tree, which is árbol, even though we are referring to the same thing, the word tree and the word árbol actually carry different vibrations despite the fact that they're talking about the same thing. This is why we have culture. This is why people are different in different cultures. This is why you can go to another country, even another city, and you can talk about the same thing, but it means different things because they carry slightly different vibrations. This is one of the limitations of language. Now, language is a beautiful thing because it does allow us to classify, define things, and to kind of bring some sense of order to things. But it's also limiting when we're wanting to raise our consciousness. So in order for us to really raise our consciousness from 3D to 4D to 5D, we have to overcome this limitation that is in language. We have to overcome this limitation when it comes to categorizing our experience, categorizing these perceptions that we see. We are supposedly moving from 3D to 5D, which if we look at this astrologically, this means that we will be moving from a dimension that is sponsored by the Gemini vibration to a dimension that's sponsored by the Leo vibration, 5D consciousness. And I understand why there is this mostly subconscious push to skip the fourth dimension. Because Leo, when you think about Leo, it's fixed fire, it rules the heart, right? It rules the heart. Everyone wants to get into their heart. But people are forgetting about Cancer energy, the fourth dimension, which is what? Cardinal water, emotion. And I think the reason why people are wanting to skip this dimension is that the Cancer vibration is a very powerful vibration, and it is a vibration that really, the mastery of such a vibration and the use of such a vibration in a way that only benefits the self and only benefits one and doesn't take into consideration others is very destructive. It is very, very destructive. And I think that's why there are individuals that want to kind of skip past this fourth dimensional awareness. Now, everybody has actually shifted into fourth dimensional consciousness, whether they realize it or not. There is this shift now to where we are all becoming more aware of the fourth dimension. And we have to understand that in order to master the fourth dimension, we have to first master our emotions. The first 4 signs of the zodiac cover the first 4 elements. We are in the 3D mostly right now, so we are learning to master air. Air! We are learning to master that vibration, communication, language, neighborhoods. It's interesting because as big as it is, as small as it is, right? We're trying to unite the world, and we can't even unite our communities. We're trying to unite countries when we can't even unite our city, our state. And we're going to take it a step further and realize that we have to unite the home and the family. So this whole idea that we can actually skip from the 3D to the 5D is bogus. That doesn't mean that there aren't individuals that have 5th dimensional awareness. That doesn't mean that there aren't beings that have 12th dimensional awareness. But as a collective, this whole idea that we can move our entire collective from 3D to 5D, I'm sorry, it's bogus, and it's not the way it works. You can't skip steps, no matter how hard you try. And that's not to say that we as a collective have not skipped steps before. The last time that we skipped a step that most of us remember was the fall of Atlantis. We tried to move from 5th dimensional awareness to 7th dimensional awareness. And consequently, we got kicked back to the 3D. That's what happened. In a nutshell. Now, of course, it's more complex than that, but that's what happened. We tried to move the entire collective. We tried to skip the 6th dimension, Virgo energy, and we sought to go to the 7th dimension, Libra energy. Sponsored by Libra vibration. Sponsored, right? It's more complex than that. I say it bluntly here, but it's more complex than that. That was the last time that we tried to transport our entire collective. And as a consequence, we fell back. We fell back to the 3rd dimension. We could have fell back further, but in many ways, I believe that we were spared and we were saved by the grace of God. We were spared and saved by the grace of God. So it's a beautiful thing. We've been given so many clues as to why we got kicked back, but we've also been given so many clues as how we can go forward and not make the same mistakes again. I don't think we're going to make the same mistake again. I don't think we'll make the same mistake again. But we have to understand, and I get why people are trying to move forward so fast. It's because they feel that if they can get outside of time and space, then they can really begin to eliminate this idea of pain and suffering. But pain and suffering exist within this universe. And it cannot be simply eliminated like that. It really can't be eliminated at all. But it does come to a point where suffering and pain is a choice. In our dimension, it doesn't seem that way. A person who was born into poverty, it doesn't seem like they would choose that sort of pain and that suffering. A kid who was born into a community that has such a lack of water and food and resources, and their skin is they just look like they're just skin and bones. They don't really look like they have anything to them. There's a lot of suffering on the planet, and it seems like, yes, that being that incarnated into that body technically did choose that suffering and that pain, which is a harsh reality to accept. But we can actually create a collective and a society where that pain and suffering is definitely minimalized. And there are realms and realities where pain and suffering is actually a choice. And now you would have to ask, why in the world would you choose pain and suffering? Why would you want to go through that? Well, for the purpose of expansion, for the purpose of integration, for the purpose of understanding. Perhaps these beings have been to other places and they saw the suffering, didn't quite understand it, despite the fact that they have kind of evolved to the point where they can just choose it, and then upon choosing so, it gives them a deeper understanding as to who they are and how they relate to the collective, how they relate to the source collective. You can't skip the fourth dimension, guys. You can't skip the mastering of your emotions. Now, the reason why we actually have shifted into the 4th D, now we're shifting into the 4th D right now, there's a couple of reasons. We have Uranus in Taurus, and we also have the North Node in Cancer. This is going to become more apparent over the next year as the North Node continues to transit Cancer. When it comes into the second decan of Cancer, 10 degrees to 20 degrees, we are really going to start to know it in our more direct life, the people that we associate with the most. Right now it's in the 3rd decan, which means that it's more of a spiritual nature and also has to do with our ancestors. Our ancestors are really talking to us and those who have passed. So if you have any past loved ones, past family members, the North Node in Cancer is making the ability to speak to them a lot more efficient right now. Now, when the North Node moves into the 1st decan of Cancer, 0 to 10 degrees of Cancer, that's when we're going to begin to notice it more with ourselves and how we are beginning to embody this 4th dimensional consciousness. So by the time that the North Node comes back around to Capricorn and it's opposing Cancer, it's going to be pretty much evident that we are shifting and have shifted into the 4th dimension. That's not to say that 5th dimensional concepts, ideas, vibrations, and frequencies will not be reflected in our world, but we can't shift dimensions as an entire collective. That's not the way it works. Like I said, we did it before and it failed. We did it before and it failed. Now here's the thing. People think of Atlantis as something that once was. Like Atlantis doesn't exist anymore. Atlantis exists in other dimensions and other frequencies. It exists before the collapse, during the collapse, and after the collapse. So Atlantis has actually evolved properly at this point to the 6th dimensional, and they actually are looking to evolve to the 7th dimension in the proper way. But what we are experiencing right now is this sort of amnesia. And now I can see it, especially within the spiritual community, of how we may be trying to and desiring to act out this mass transfer of a collective shifting dimensions improperly. Think of it like this. Think of like you come to a river and you see stones and you're trying to skip the stones. You can't skip the stones crossing this river. You can try. You may even make it across, but first of all, you're going to exhaust more energy unnecessarily, and you run the risk of slipping into the river and falling because water is running over these rocks. They're smooth, and it's not as easy to just get your grip, especially when you're trying to skip steps. Or if you're trying to even run upstairs. You ever try to run upstairs and try to skip steps? You may be able to make it up perceivably, but it certainly is harder. And you run the risk of falling. We ran the risk of falling and we fell. Simultaneously, we rise at the same time. This whole desire to get outside of time, space, and reality does come from the age of Aquarius. Now, why do I say that? Time is ruled by Saturn, which is Capricorn energy, which sponsors the 10th dimension. And then you get to Aquarius, which traditionally is ruled by Saturn, but it is also ruled by Uranus. And it is when you get to the 11th dimension that time and space truly does cease to exist. Perceivably. Perceivably, it ceases to exist. You can choose to go into time, you can choose to go into space. But this is why Aquarius this is what makes them time travelers. This is what makes them aliens. This is what makes them so innovative, because they truly do come from the future. They come from the future. A future that is so in the future that it's almost sort of like an ancient future. It's outside of time-space reality, perceivably. The Age of Aquarius is here to integrate this knowledge of what it truly means to expand and raise our awareness. Not only that, but Aquarius is really going to allow you to connect with individuals that resonate with the exaltation of your ego. But before it does that, it's going to, of course, connect with individuals that just simply resonate with where your ego is right now. As I've said, the ego is sponsored by the first dimension. It is sponsored by Aries energy. And when you look at that, that's cardinal fire. It is the spark. It is the moment that you light a flame. It is the moment that it just clicks. And then it's there, it's a reality. It's a very quick vibration. And it's actually very subtle, which is kind of funny and kind of ironic, because Aries is anything but subtle, right? They are definitely very much so in your face. They definitely have this liveliness to them. But we have to understand that the Aries vibration, the spark, the clicking of that spark, and then you see it, it's manifested, it appears physical. Believe it or not, that's actually the Taurus aspect of it. It is that initial, and then the flame is there. It appears physical, Taurus. So it's a very quick vibration, it's a very subtle vibration, and it's a vibration that's actually hard to grasp. This is what makes Aries forces to be reckoned with. All the signs are forces to be reckoned with. And here's the interesting thing about it, and I don't know why people don't really think about this in the spiritual community, but in many ways you can attribute spirituality to Pisces, which is the natural 12th house. But what is the second house of Pisces? Aries. And what does the second house rule? Self-worth, self-value, possessions. Our spirits value our ego. Our spirits value our ego. Our spirits and our soul value our ego. Especially an ego that has exalted itself to a standard of living, to a standard of being, where it does take the needs of others as its own and does everything in its power to create a better situation for all parties involved. This is, in many ways, the vibration of Mars and Capricorn, which Capricorn ruling the natural 10th house. Mars is exalted in Capricorn. Now, you can have a Mars and Capricorn-like individual, whether they actually have Mars here or not, but you can have, I want you to think of Mars, and when I say these transits or when I say these placements, I want you to think of it as a vibration or like an element. Now, you can have a Mars and Capricorn individual that would do anything necessary to get to the top and not give a fuck about who they step on. And they may do it too. And they may become very successful. They may gain all the riches in the world, but they screw over people on the way to the top. You can also have the Mars and Capricorn individual who will do everything that they can to get to the top, but they bring people up with them. That is what we are going for. That is what we are going for. But here's the thing. When people climb mountains, and I'm really getting this vision of climbing Mount Everest. When you get to a certain point, there is a line of people there climbing with you, and you attach yourself onto this rope of people, and you are climbing up this mountain together, but no one can really go in front of another. You kind of can as you take rest and stuff. You can kind of move forward, but you can't drag everyone behind you up at your own pace, because it's a steep climb, it's a dangerous climb, and you can die. A lot of people have died climbing Mount Everest. So you have to go at your own pace. This is what Jesus was speaking of. This is what all these gurus were talking about. Because Jesus could have brought all of us up with him, right? And kind of dragged us up almost like forced this ascension, but that Jesus knew that was not the right thing to do. This was a go at it with your own pace. The doors are open, and I am here when you are ready, my child. That's what this sort of vibration is. So as we climb this mountain, and as we are exalting our egos, we have to realize that we can't bring up someone who isn't per se ready. We can't be like, oh, but wouldn't it be so great to, why wouldn't you want to climb this mountain at the same pace as me? Right? But like I said, the person with the Mars and Capricorn vibration in its exaltation encourages others to climb. They don't step on people to get to the top. They encourage people to climb. And they encourage people to climb at their own pace. And the thing is that your pace is going to change based off of your situation. Sometimes your pace climbing this mountain can be a lot faster than others. And it's supposed to fluctuate. It's not supposed to always remain at a constant speed. You'll get burnout, and you'll tumble, and you'll fall. So there'll be periods in your life where you do, and you feel this. You feel this naturally throughout your days. That's why you have good days and bad days. That's why you have some days where you feel super productive, and other days where you're not really super productive. And it's okay to have those. It's okay to have days where you're super productive, you get a lot of things done, and like, wow, I feel good. And it's okay to have days where you chill back and don't do much of anything at all. That's okay. As I said, there's this push to get outside of time, space, reality. And that is essentially this whole desire to move from the 10th dimension to the 11th dimension. And we have to understand that as we are shifting dimensions, there are beings in these other dimensions that are shifting as well. There are beings in the 4th dimension that are shifting to the 5th dimension, the 5th to the 6th, to the 7th, and so forth. Now, the beautiful thing is that we actually have insight into how we shift dimensions based off of our chart, especially based off of our rising and our house place and our houses, our house cusp. And it gives us sort of this idea of how we are perceiving this shift. So take, for example, somebody who has let's just say a Leo rising, okay? Someone who's a Leo rising. All right, the third dimension, their third house would be Libra. So in many ways, they're kind of experiencing this third dimension in a Libra-like way, And the danger that I see is that it will be this push to skip the Scorpio vibration. In this case, the person with the Leo rising, if they're experiencing this third dimension in a Libra-like way, It wanted to go straight to the 5th dimension, Sagittarius, which makes sense from the Leo's perspective because it's the same element as them, right? Sagittarius. So it does kind of make sense to try and do that. It does make kind of sense to kind of do that, right? But you can't skip steps. You can't skip steps. So you, like I said, you can look at your own chart. So take, for example, just me. I am a Sagittarius rising. So I experience this 3rd dimension in an Aquarian-like way. In an Aquarian-like way. And there is there's this push to try and skip the 4th dimension and go right into the 5th dimension. And you can't do that. That's probably why I'm actually a fan of Aries energy and why I'm a fan of the ego, in the sense that it is something that is required. And it is something that needs to be integrated. My 5th house is Aries, okay? My 5th house, the natural 5th house is Leo, which was the natural 5th dimension, but the way I'm perceiving it is, the way I will perceive it will be through the Aries vibration, the 5th dimension. And the way that I perceive the 4th dimension right now is through the Pisces. I've experienced it in a Pisces-like way. In a Pisces-like way. So for me, the 4th dimension is absolutely essential to get to the 5th dimension, because in many ways it is a bridge. It is a bridge. It is the stepping stone. It is a necessary step to move forward. The age of Aquarius ruling the natural 11th house, which is when you when you are outside of space and time, perceivably outside of space and time. This age of Aquarius is going to really bring in this knowledge that we can't just skip steps. Because here's the thing, there are beings in the 5th dimension that are trying to skip ahead to the 7th dimension, right? And if you think about the 5th dimension as being naturally ruled by Leo, and if you look at Leo as the 1st house, okay, look at Leo. I want you to look at Leo as the 1st house. What is opposite Leo? Aquarius. So that would make Aquarius, in this case, the 7th house. They're trying to skip this whole Capricornian energy. The 6th house is naturally ruled by Virgo, which happens to come after Leo in the natural houses. But Capricorn, in this case, for the Leo rising, would be the 6th house. 6th house is mutable earth. Out of the mutable signs, it is arguably the slowest of the mutable signs. Arguably. Our earth changes, albeit very slowly. Sometimes quickly, but very slowly. And that can be frustrating for a Leo, because Leo can get bored. You know, if things are moving too slowly. A Leo can get bored. Right? But these beings still cannot skip the 6th dimensional awareness. They have to integrate it. That does not mean that that you can't become aware of the 7th dimension and begin to express ideas, facets, vibrations, and frequencies of this dimension. But you still can't skip the 6th dimension, just like we cannot skip the 4th dimension. We cannot skip the mastering of our emotions. We simply cannot do it. So we really have to come to this understanding that we are where we are, and we are where we are for a reason. And there is nothing wrong with that. It's beautiful that we want to blaze forward, move ahead. It's beautiful that we want to become as, I guess you could say, quote unquote, pure as possible. quote unquote, I guess you can say, this whole elimination of suffering, and pain. But these are actually vibrations that are needing integration. The whole running away from pain and suffering is actually causing more of it. You have to face it square on. The reason why there is a lot of strife in this world, outside of the fact that we do have communication errors simply because we have so many different languages and ways of perceiving things and ways at communicating things to each other, but it also has to do with this it's having to do with this refusal to address our emotions and this refusal to address our emotional guidance system. This is why the matriarch is making a comeback. Now it seems very messy right now, very crazy and weird, but this is why we're seeing a rise in the matriarch, because this world has been ruled by the patriarch for such a long time, and now the matriarch is starting to make a return. And it's interesting because Gemini in many ways is not even necessarily the patriarch. I would say it's more like kids, I would say it's more like kids, because Gemini is what? It's the mirror. Kids are a mirror of us. They really are a mirror of us. And before you become a mother or before you become a father, you were first a child. You were first a kid. You were someone's child. You were born. Right? So what came first, the chicken or the egg? I don't know. I think that's debatable. I think both answers are correct. So how can you take this information that I am providing for you all and use it in your own life? Well, one, of course, you can look at your chart to see how you're perceiving these dimensional shifts and these dimensional awarenesses. But really, you want to look at your experience and you really want to look through it, I feel, in the eyes of a student. Because we are actually shifting from the teacher vibration in many ways to the student. You gotta understand, like gurus and spiritual gurus and all that stuff, a lot of that is Pisces energy. Aquarius energy is, in many ways, the classroom. It's in many ways the classroom. It's the collective. We are shifting into a world where we have no gurus. We have no teachers, really. We don't necessarily have masters. We have people that are wanting to master crafts, but at the same time, we're going to go into this sort of collective think tank-like vibration to where it's going to be more of like it's not going to be a teacher standing at the front of a room and, giving this information and this knowledge to the students. It's going to be more of like a circle, more of like a, we're all going to kind of chip in our 2 cents, say, and express from our own experience. We are shifting into a time where we do not have spiritual teachers. There will still be individuals that are more spiritually inclined and that will sort of fall into the role of a teacher or a guru, but it's not going to be the same as it is right now. It's not going to be the same, because what we're going to realize is that we are all teachers and we are all students. We are all extensions of source perspective, God, Goddess, the Creator. We are all extensions of it. And if we are all extensions of it, then no one of us has the ultimate say-so on what this experience means. That's why I prefaced at the beginning of this to do your own in-search, because by doing your own in-search, you're going to begin to gain clarity on what you need to do in your perspective, in your life, and how to move forward, how to evolve, and what you need to do to attain fulfillment. This looks differently for everybody. It looks different for everybody. I met an individual this week who he worked for AT&T and stuff like that. He was like a district manager or something like that. You know, and they came in and installed our internet and stuff like that. Internet's ruled by Aquarius, by the way. And this individual, I don't think he makes oogles of money. He probably doesn't have like 10 cars or anything like that. But he was a generally fulfilled person. He wasn't a millionaire, I'm sure, but he was a genuinely fulfilled person, and I could tell. Guess what his sign was? He was a Gemini too. But he was a genuinely fulfilled person. I can tell. And there are some conversations out there that say that, oh, in order to be fulfilled, you need to have this X amount of money, this amount of cars, this amount of houses, whatever like that. And if you don't do these things, and if you don't necessarily have the drive to do these things, you are a procrastinator and you're lazy. No, that's taking it to the most extreme, but I do feel that. I do see that in the community. And it's like, there are times where I procrastinate, but why can't I genuinely enjoy sitting down and playing video games for 30 minutes to an hour? Why does that have to be procrastination? Perhaps that is what's giving me fulfillment in that moment. And that is okay. That's what I am perceiving. So this whole idea that we can push our perceptions on other people as ultimate truth is actually what's fucking us over right now in the third dimension. It's fucking us over. Am I saying don't go for things? Am I saying don't strive for things? I'm not even necessarily saying just sit around and not do anything, because your soul and your spirit does want you to do things and go out and experience things and to move. It can't just stay still and be stagnant. But do not conform your idea of fulfillment to what someone else's idea of fulfillment is. Because if you do that and if you don't attain that idea of fulfillment, then you're going to develop resentment, jealousy, anger. You're going to feel like you're being left out. And I experienced this. I'm talking from experience, guys. I experience this now. And it's something that I'm having to work through and integrate. Because I'm sure that there are at least a billion people out there that probably wish they had my life. You know? And I, quote unquote, just a restaurant server who does this sort of stuff on the side. It does all these videos, stuff like that on the side, you know. But there are beings out there that would want to be in my position. Gratitude is very important. Gratitude is so important. And this remembrance that we are an extension of Source Perspective. So we are exactly where we need to be. Which means that we are where we need to be as far as being in this third dimension. And we are where we need to be in this shifting of the 3D to the 4D. And then, of course, to the 5D. But like I said, there are beings that are shifting in other dimensions that are going up too. Some are even shifting down. There are beings in the first dimension that are shifting to the second dimension. There are beings in the 11th dimension that are shifting to the 12th dimension. There are beings in the 12th dimension shifting to the 13th dimension. And I'm going to go ahead and say this right now. It's a little bit of occult knowledge. Ultimately, there are an infinite number of dimensions. But the 13th dimension is a very lonely dimension. It's a very lonely dimension. That's honestly like a whole nother video. Talking about the 13th dimension. That's a whole nother video. You can't skip steps. It's just like anything that we do, right? You can't just hop into a car and start driving when you had no knowledge of how to drive a car and how to operate a car. It's just like you can't just go from being, a baby to being a teenager. You have to go through the steps. You have to go through the steps. You can't just skip steps. You can't just skip steps. I do feel that the collective, especially this new age spirituality community, the self-help community, that we'll begin to realize that we can't just skip the fourth dimension, that we have to address the fourth dimension. We have to address the qualities of the fourth dimension and how to work with and integrate this, and also realizing the superpowers of the fourth dimension and how powerful this vibration is. Cancers get a lot of flack. So do Capricorns. Cancers and Capricorns are under attack right now. Capricorns are under attack. We're more aware of how Capricorns are being under attack right now in the collective because it's more readily apparent. Cancers are being under attack as well, although it's more subtle and it's from a more spiritual place. But Cancers are being under attack right now. Just talk to your Cancer. If you are a Cancer, you probably have had ridiculous dreams where people have been chasing you and been coming after you. You've been having to defend yourself and shit. Like a lot. Or just talk to your local Cancer and they probably have this subtle feeling that someone's watching them. Cancers are under attack. Capricorns are under attack right now. We are definitely shifting. We are definitely moving. And this is going to be a super, super powerful year. It already has been. And there's the thing though, it's Pisces season. So if none of what I'm saying makes sense, good. That's exactly what it's supposed to be. It's not supposed to make sense. It's not supposed to make sense. When I was even thinking about this, because I didn't necessarily know I was going to do a message or a talk tonight, but it was in the last hour of work or something like that, and it just kind of sparked off in my mind, and then it just kind of tumbled, and I was like, whoa, I need to talk about this. This is really important. This really is. At the very least, it's important for me. And that may seem like a very ego-driven thing, but when it comes to these videos and stuff like that, while I do make it for you all, spreading, my perception of this growing awareness and consciousness, I do it for me. I really do, because I need to hear my words and my voice. Because that's actually in many ways how I learn the most, and how I know myself is by expressing it like this. That's even my I think it's my human design. I'm a projector, and I think it's I'm self-projected. So the best way for me to know myself is actually by speaking to myself. This is why a lot of times people always thought I was crazy growing up, because I've noticed it over my life. I constantly will talk to myself, and people will think I'm crazy, whatever like that. And I'm like, no, I just talk to myself, because I'm the person I'm going to be with for the rest of my life. I'm with myself all the time, so I might as well get to know myself and talk to myself, right? Of course, then now a lot of times I sing to myself. I sing music because music helps lift my vibration, even if it's a song that's not necessarily the kindest or the nicest, whatever like that. It may seem a little bit dark, whatever like that. At least I know where I'm at. You know what I mean? At least I know where I'm at. Speaking of music, you guys have homework. I'm going to post it in the description below. I have 2 songs that I want you all to listen to. Both of them by Matchbox 20. And these songs are very, very... these are songs that definitely spoke to me today. And I really do feel like these are songs that can help you as well. especially in this time, especially with Pisces season, especially coming off of the new moon in Pisces and barreling towards the full moon in Libra. I think these two songs will really help. And another thing that I have for you, another piece of homework, is that I want you to watch an episode of Pokemon that I watched earlier today. And I'm going to post that in the description below. If I can find it on YouTube, I will. It is on Netflix, and I will tell you what episode and which season and stuff like that. But this episode is very important about how to pick ourselves back up and how to face adversity head on and how to really transform, you know. So, like I said, you have homework, you have those two songs to listen to, and then that episode of Pokemon. If you don't have Netflix, and if you really want to actually do this homework and stuff like that, then shoot me an email, and I will see about getting you access to this video and stuff like that. So what I probably would do, honestly, is I'll probably record it with my webcam, and I'll just email it to you, okay? So you can watch it. And yeah, it won't be necessarily the greatest quality, but at least you'll have it, okay? So that is your homework. Listen to those two songs, watch that episode of Pokemon, and be yourself. Be yourself. Unapologetically. Be yourself. And help to bring someone up with you. You don't have to drag them up with you. They can come up with you willingly. They can come up with you at their own pace, but bring someone up with you. Whether that's you actually, maybe you find your tribe, or you have like a friend or a colleague or a family member, and they actually begin to show interest, and you bring them up with you, or you just drop a smile in someone's life. Maybe you just drop a simple compliment in someone's life. That's a way that you can pick somebody up. You can just drop a smile or drop a compliment in someone's life. Say that, oh, your hair looks nice today. You have a pretty smile. Okay? Or you say like, I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for helping me in this moment. It can be a random stranger. It can be a friend, family member, a colleague, whatever. Especially random strangers, because that will definitely be awesome. Age of Aquarius is actually going to increase our compassion with random strangers that we'll only meet once in our life. Random passerbys. It's going to actually increase the quality of that relationship, because we have many different kinds of relationships, but one relationship that we don't really develop because it's hard to develop it is the single encounter relationship. But the Age of Aquarius is actually going to make it so that we increase the value of the single encounter relationship. I'm going to leave it at that. Hope you all enjoyed this. I enjoyed it. And I love you all so much. Y'all take care. Y'all stay blissed out. Y'all stay blissful, stay blessed. And always remember, my beautiful brothers and sisters, to keep moving forward, to stay focused, and Yahoo! Smile often.